The name Aurangzeb evokes a very specific image in modern political discourse, an uncompromising religious zealot. However, the internal records of his administration reveal a sovereign driven by cold material data. He abandoned the secular-leaning, syncretic policies of the emperors who came before him. Under his command, the Mughal state achieved a level of imperial success that had previously been out of reach. This map illustrates the absolute maximum territorial extent of the empire. During his nearly 50-year reign, he expanded Mughal borders across almost the entire Indian subcontinent. This chart shows the economic result of that expansion. The Mughal machine generated an economic output surpassing Qing China, becoming the world's largest economy. His exchequer raised £100 million annually, more than 10 times the revenue of his contemporary, Louis XIV of France. Viewing his reign exclusively through a modern lens of tolerance fails to explain how a single sovereign successfully governed and expanded the wealthiest empire on earth. Aurangzeb seized the throne in 1658 after a violent war of succession, a conflict that culminated in executing his eldest brother, the liberalist Dara Shikoh. He declared his own father, Emperor Shah Jahan, incompetent to rule, locking him away in the Agra fort for the remainder of his life. These familial purges created a massive deficit in his political legitimacy. The actions were so heavily opposed that the chief Qazi initially refused to crown him. Facing popular opposition, he needed a new ideological foundation. He aligned himself with the strict Islamic orthodoxy of the Mujahidi order to win the support of the ulama. His embrace of hardline religious orthodoxy functioned as a calculated political mechanism to legitimize a violently contested throne. This pivot to orthodoxy produced the Fatwa-e-Alamgiri. He employed hundreds of jurists to standardize Hanafi law across the entire subcontinent. The first pillar of this legal system was strict adherence to Sharia, establishing Islamic law as the baseline for imperial morality. This was met by a second competing pillar, Zawabit, the secular decrees of the state. This created inherent tension between divine law and practical requirements of running an empire. Aurangzeb insisted secular state decrees could explicitly override Sharia when necessary for effective governance. We see this centralized power in action with his 1663 decree banning the practice of sati across all lands under Mughal control. This institutionalized framework ensured that religious orthodoxy remained subordinate to the functional requirements of the state. This pragmatism extends to the 1679 reimposition of the Jizya Tax on non-Muslim subjects. The tax had been suspended by his great-grandfather Akbar exactly a century earlier. When Aurangzeb brought it back, it included an unequal burden on trade, taxing Hindu merchants at a rate of 5%, while Muslim merchants paid 2.5%. Modern historians reject that this was driven by blind religious bigotry. By 1679, the empire fought simultaneous, highly expensive campaigns against the Marathas and Pashtuns. To maintain his overextended military, the state required vast, immediate new revenue streams, and the jizya provided that cash flow. The policy was explicitly targeted. Women, children, elders, the unemployed, and the disabled were perpetually exempt from paying a single rupee. Even more tellingly, Rajput and Maratha state officials were also completely exempt from the tax. The jizya was a highly calculated fiscal emergency measure, mathematically engineered to fund a war machine without collapsing the essential bureaucratic class. Any evaluation of his legacy must account for his specific orders to demolish non-Muslim schools and Hindu temples. This map plots specific temple destructions in Mathura and Rajasthan. According to historian Richard Eaton, these destructions were highly selective and tied strictly to political insubordination. When we lay the data out, these locations correlate directly with epicenters of active armed rebellions. At the exact same time, Aurangzeb was issuing firmans, royal mandates, granting land and funding to protect other Hindu sites. State resources were actively maintaining the Mahakaleshwar Temple in Ujjain, the Balaji Temple in Chitrakoot, and the Umanand Temple in Guwahati. To understand this paradox, we have to look at the internal demographics of Aurangzeb's court. This demographic breakdown shows that between 1679 and 1707, the proportion of Hindu officials working in the imperial administration actually rose by half. Hindu administrators, primarily Marathas, recruited for the Deccan campaigns, made up exactly 31.6% of his bureaucracy, the highest percentage in Mughal history. Ultimately, Aurangzeb deployed the tactic of temple destruction as a targeted political punishment, calibrated specifically by the state to suppress active, armed rebellions. Aurangzeb was a deeply orthodox ruler who desired a dominant Islamic framework for his empire, but his personal piety did not blind his statecraft. When he executed religious law, the application was strictly pragmatic. The Fatwa-e-Alamgiri, the Jizya Tax, and his targeted temple policies were complex tools leveraged by a sovereign desperate to manage a fractious, sprawling state under immense financial pressure. Evaluating historical governance through modern, binary lenses fails to capture the data-driven reality of imperial survival.